Welcome to Afternoon Tea with KC Women's Ministry. I'm Brittany.
I'm Madison.
I am a birth and bereavement doula, certified by Still Birthday, and I am the marketing director with KC Women's Ministry.
I am also a certified birth and bereavement doula through Still Birthday. I am also a trained postpartum doula, and I am the director of doula operations with KC Women's Ministry.
All right, so we're here to talk today about some breastfeeding. So there are lots of times when I am scrolling through Facebook or any social media for that matter, and we see lots of different breastfeeding terminology. And if you are new to the breastfeeding world, just to being a parent in general and to breastfeeding, it can be really overwhelming and daunting to see all of the terminology that's out there, and trying to figure out what it is can be really confusing. So we thought, you know what, let's do some clarification. Let's talk about the terminology with breastfeeding and what they mean, what these words mean, and how it affects your feeding choices for your baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has their own feeding journey, especially for newborns. There's so many different ways. And sometimes it can feel like all or nothing. And there's so many options for in between. I think that we as a society sometimes get into our head, it's either breast milk or formula. It's one or the other. You're either breastfeeding or you're bottle feeding. And if you're bottle feeding, you're formula feeding. And if you're breastfeeding, that's all you're doing. It seems like it can be all or nothing. And it's so not that way. There are so many in-betweens. Even as we were preparing for this video, we were writing it down, how many options, how many variations, how many different ways that you can combine everything between the different methods of feeding and the different milk that you can actually provide between breast milk and formula and all of that, that it's not all or nothing.
Yeah, and we didn't actually talk about all of the different types of milk that you can provide, which there are lots. So that might actually have to be another video because
it will definitely
there are many options and many benefits to each one. So if you guys are interested, we'll do a video on that too.
Yes, absolutely. For the sake of time, we'll just talk about breast milk and formula for today.
Yes.
Just kind of to keep it simple.
So one of the bits of terminology that we hear and see quite frequently on social media, especially, is exclusive breastfeeding. What does that mean? Like, I kind of have a gist of an idea of what exclusive breastfeeding is. I mean, what does that mean? They're only getting breast milk, or does that mean they're only on the boob?
Yeah. And a lot of times exclusive breastfeeding is shortened to EBF. So especially if you're on social media, you'll see it a lot as shortened to just EBF. I'll see a lot in the comments like, wait, what is EBF? Is this like a special type of formula or like a diet, or what's EBF? Is exclusively breastfeeding. So typically when we're talking about exclusively breastfeeding, that means that there's no bottles. No supplementation, exclusively baby to breast, baby to chest, breast milk, no bottles, no supplementation, just the parent's milk, just mom's milk.
Yep. And that can be difficult for some families. That can be easy for others. It just depends on your lifestyle, what your choices are, what really works best for you, and what baby's going to take. Most babies will take a bottle. They may not necessarily take it from the chest feeding or breastfeeding parent, but they will take a bottle if they're hungry enough from someone else. Now, if they're taking a bottle, again, that's not exclusively breastfeeding. It's not feasible for many families to exclusively breastfeed, especially if the parent that is breastfeeding, such as the mother or the chest feeding parent, if that individual goes back to work, you will have to pump. And then you have a breastfeeding and pumping situation. And we don't have a special term for that. It's just breastfeeding and pumping. I think we just call that breastfeeding in general.
Yes, yes. I think typically it's usually under like assumed that especially in society today, that if you're breastfeeding, you're most likely pumping as well, just because a lot of parents work. They have to go back to work, or we live in such a fast-paced society that we end up with supply issues very, very often. And one of the best ways to increase supply is to pump in addition to feeding. And so there's pumping in addition to feeding, and increasing the supply that way. So I think that so many people pump that it's just kind of assumed that most people who do breastfeed are also pumping.
The term breastfeeding is just all inclusive of all situations with breastfeeding. And as Madison said, it generally is going to include breastfeeding, pumping, giving bottles. It's going to include all forms of breastfeeding, not including formula and supplementation. That is where the term breastfeeding is not all inclusive in the whole breastfeeding grand scheme of things, because generally if you're talking to someone who's saying they're breastfeeding, they don't have formula in the house, they don't need to supplement for whatever reason. They will say, I am breastfeeding and supplementing. Which supplementing is providing an alternative form of sustenance, such as formula or goat's milk, or something special like rice cereal, or which doesn't necessarily have nutritional value, but they use.
But that's for another video.
That's another conversation. So, but that is along the lines of breastfeeding and supplementation. So what you would supplement with is their term for supplementing. Now, the term supplementing doesn't necessarily cover how they're supplementing, which you have many ways to supplement as well. You have
a bottle.
Yeah, you've got the bottle. You have for really tiny infants who just don't have a mouth large enough to go on the breast, they will sometimes use a spoon, or they'll use a tube that's sitting right next to the breast as mom is trying to breastfeed, so that they're getting either formula or breast milk through that tube. You can supplement with breast milk, with the mother's breast milk, or with a donor breast milk. So you have lots of different ways to supplement. Just because they're saying they're supplementing doesn't necessarily mean it's with formula, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's with a bottle. And then of course you have formula. So when they say formula, they're probably typically meaning just a standard type of formula, just what you might pick up at the store. There are lots of different types of formulas, lots of different brands of formulas. There are formulas made from goat's milk. There are formulas made, they're usually made from cow's milk of some kind, with a lot of extra vitamins and minerals in order to give it the properties that an infant needs to grow properly, such as folic acid. It's going to have all of that stuff in there that the baby needs.
Yes. And then I think we skipped one.
We did.
We skipped exclusively pumping, which is essentially going to be feeding baby in the same way as formula, but using breast milk. So a bottle, or maybe one of those supplemental devices, but the parent is exclusively pumping. So they're pumping out the breast milk and then using that to feed baby.
Exactly. So those are your basic terms that you're going to be seeing just in maybe support groups, in Facebook, when people are asking questions, exclusively breastfeeding, pumping, exclusively pumping, formula, supplementing. Lots of different terminology. These are just the basic terms. There's so many other terms when you're talking breastfeeding, such as inverted nipple. Well, what the heck is that? And that's again in another video. But hopefully this cleared up a few things for you and helps you understand maybe a question that you have, and you can then clearly ask that question of your medical provider.
And I do have some pictures of some of the supplemental devices if we want to see those.
Yeah. I love pictures. Go ahead and share.
I do too. Let me pull up one more. Okay. Can you see just the Google screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is a great picture of how you can see the tube is on the breast. And so baby is able to stimulate the breast to help bring in supply while also getting supplementation through that tube. And what this device actually looks like is like this. So you can put in whatever supplement that is, whether it's breast milk, formula, or some other kind of dietary food that the baby may need. Depending on what their restriction is. These are typically used, like Brittany said earlier, in the little babies. You find these a lot in the NICU with preemies. And then these tubes can go either on the breast or on a finger, or you know, on a pacifier, or on a spoon, or whatever kind of device is needed to help baby eat. So then over here we can see a baby using a cup to drink. This can help with babies who don't quite have that suck reflex down yet, but they're trying to avoid using bottles because they are working very hard on breastfeeding. You can use a cup or a spoon. And then here we can see a syringe feeding. They're using a pinky finger to help stimulate that sucking reflex while giving the supplement through a syringe. So baby is sucking on the finger like they would a nipple while giving the supplement, whether it's breast milk, formula, or whatever that dietary food is that they need through that syringe. And those are the most common that we'll see. And you can see that sometimes they will give the syringe without the finger. I've also seen it with a pacifier, but this just isn't stimulating that suck reflex, which helps if you're trying to establish breastfeeding. So those are some of the most common of those supplementation devices that we can use for supplemental feedings.
Mm-hmm. And those again are devices other than bottles.
Yes. I like pictures.
I do too. I like pictures too a lot. So that covers our topic for today, actually. That was a nice quick one.
Yeah, it's rare.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us for Afternoon Tea with Casey Women's Ministry. I'm Brittany.
I'm Madison.
And we are happy to help. Anytime you have any questions, please reach out to us.
Yes.